네, 잠시 안내 말씀드리겠습니다.
Some housekeeping remarks. From 2 o'clock, we are just about to commence the Seoul Urban Regeneration International Conference 2020 here at the On Conference Room at the Seoul Metropolitan City Hall. We are also sending out this conference via our official YouTube channel, both in Korea and abroad. Also, to help your understanding, we will be providing simultaneous interpretation. We will see you in just a short while. Thank you. Thank you very much for your participation, both online and offline, from Korea and around the world. My name is Cho Ju-yeon. I will be leading you throughout the conference. Amid COVID-19, we are hosting this conference, and we do need to wear a mask, but because we are indoors and we have conducted disease control measures, and due to presentations, we will be conducting the conference without a mask.
Thank you once again for your attendance this afternoon. We would like to make an announcement that due to COVID-19, it is a precautionary measure as to us wearing masks. But because we are all inside and we have made all precautionary measures, we will have the speakers deliver their presentations without their masks on. We kindly ask for your understanding as well. 네, 서울 도시재생 국제 컨퍼런스는
Seoul Urban
2018년에
Regeneration
이어서 두
International
번째로
Conference
진행이
was
되는
hosted for the
회의입니다.
first time in
올해는
2018, and
서울시와 또
this year we're hosting the second of its kind. This conference is even more meaningful because it is being co-hosted by the Seoul Metropolitan City and UN Habitat. Let us now commence our conference here at Seoul On Conference Hall under the topic of Post-COVID-19 Future and Strategy of Urban Regeneration. We will now commence the Seoul Urban Regeneration International Conference 2020. Thank you very much. With a new approach of reusing and renovating, we are now approaching urban regeneration with higher sustainability. Experts from around the world and scholars from around the world are putting people at the center of these issues in finding solutions in the most sustainable way possible. And so, through today and tomorrow, we will take a look at the value of urban regeneration, and let us also take this time to think about urban regeneration and its direction in the post-COVID-19 era. We would now like to open the conference with an opening video to share with you the ideas for the conference.
Cities evolve as much the same way as we live a life. Every city has unavoidably seen a life cycle of introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Cities continue to exist based on history and culture as our households pass down from generation to generation. Urban regeneration that instills new breath into a declining city. Seoul is also seeking to bring about a lasting improvement, making the most of its innovative, unique values. The journey together with citizens over the past decade, now we call Seoul the model city of urban regeneration. Some crises paralyze our preparedness and response. The pandemic has made people separated from each other, freezing our thought and social activities. Amid the misery that can last much longer than expected, we are quickly adapting ourselves to new lifestyles and relentlessly endeavoring to overcome the crisis with a belief of being connected, although society is on pause. We will brainstorm strategic options for community resilience and rise, and conduct an experiment for local community by making small changes in everyday places. Seoul is ready to share and expand our endeavors and achievements with the world cities. We are physically separated, but still remain connected. If a paradigm changes, we will then find a new way for it. Seoul Metropolitan Government is earnest to envision the future of urban regeneration with the world's cities in response to the post-COVID-19 era.
네, 감사합니다. 지금부터는 2020 서울 도시재생 국제 컨퍼런스 개회식에 참가해 주시는 그 연사분들의 소개가 있겠습니다. And from now on, please allow me to introduce our esteemed guests who have graced us with their presence for the opening ceremony as well as our entire event. 먼저 화상으로 함께 참여해 주시는 분입니다. 서울은 오후인데요. 이분이 계신 곳에서는 사실 새벽 이른 시간일 거라고 생각합니다. 미국에 계신 월드뱅크 그룹 글로벌 디렉터 사미에 와바님입니다. First, we have a guest who is participating online, and I believe at the point where he is right now, it's very early on in the morning. So please welcome World Bank Group Global Director, Mr. Samie Waba. Good morning, sir.
안녕하세요. Good morning to everyone. On behalf of the World Bank Group, I would like to congratulate Seoul Metro Government.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your participation. 자, 그럼 국내 스튜디오에 또 함께 계시는 연사분들을 소개해 드리도록 하겠습니다. 서정협 서울시 권한대행님 함께 자리하셨습니다. Mr. 서정협, Acting Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan Government is here with us. Thank you very much. 김희걸 서울특별시의회 도시계획관리위원장님 자리하셨습니다. Mr. Kim Hee-geol, Chairman of the City Planning and Management Committee from the Seoul Metropolitan Council. 감사합니다. 이충기 서울특별시 도시재생 명예시장님도 자리하셨습니다. Mr. Lee Chung-gi, Honorary Mayor of Urban Regeneration from the Seoul Metropolitan Government. Thank you once again for your participation. 네, 고맙습니다. 그럼 오늘 축사를 제일 먼저 해주실 월드뱅크 그룹 글로벌 디렉터 사미에 와바님을 다시 모셔보도록 하겠습니다. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let us invite the global director, Mr. Samie Waba of the World Bank Group, for his congratulatory remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the World Bank Group, I would like to congratulate Seoul Metro Government for organizing this important and timely event discussing urban regeneration and the future direction in these challenging times of COVID-19 pandemic. Special thanks to the acting mayor, Jong Hyuk So, to the chairman, City Planning and Management Committee, Hee-geol Kim, and to the Honorary Mayor of Urban Regeneration, Chung Ki Lee. I would also like to extend greetings to all the speakers and the participants, including our partner, Maimouna Mohammed Sharif, the UN Habitat Executive Director. Now, the topic of this conference continues to be central for mayors and for citizens. Cities, and especially urban centers, continue to face pressures from rapid urbanization, densification, and degradation of services, resulting in, economically, the disappearance of traditional jobs and crafts and loss of skills and incomes, leaving residents poorer. Physically, lack of conservation policies leading to degradation of heritage. And from an infrastructure perspective, deterioration of services and housing conditions, driving out the middle class and leaving downtowns hosting poorer communities. Now you add COVID-19, which is a massive challenge, cities are finding themselves in the front line because they need to take measures to control the spread of the virus. They need to take care of the poor and the vulnerable. They need to maintain essential services, and they need to plan for resilient recovery, all while having lower municipal revenues because the lockdown affected economic activities. I'm delighted because the World Bank and Seoul Metropolitan Government have been working together closely for the past decade to promote an integrated approach for sustainable and inclusive development through collaborative research and knowledge exchange. So in 2017, through our partnership with Seoul Metro Government, with the Seoul Urban Solutions Agency, the University of Seoul, UNESCO, and the Korea Green Growth Trust Fund, we documented Seoul's unique experience in urban regeneration, cultural heritage, and sustainable tourism. We organized a technical deep dive in Seoul, which was attended by senior officials from 11 client countries, together with World Bank and UNESCO officials, to learn about Seoul's experience and discuss strategies for unlocking the value of cultural assets for economic development, social integration, and poverty reduction. Through our collaboration, we're learning how Seoul is taking a people-centered approach to ensure inclusion and sustainability. Local governments, businesses, and residents active in urban regeneration, cultural heritage, and the creative industries all recognize that people and culture are unique assets for inclusive growth in Seoul. Culture is the foundation upon which cities are built. From cultural heritage to creative activities, culture defines us and our values and shapes the places we live in. Now, with the pressures from rapid urbanization, many cities around the world are exploring ways to harness their culture and creative assets for social and economic development and for recovery and building back better from the various crises. Culture is both an asset and a tool for urban regeneration, and it plays a vital role in enhancing social cohesion and the city's livability and competitiveness. Culture is also critical to meet the World Bank's twin goals of ending extreme poverty and promoting shared prosperity. This is well reflected in Seoul's culture-based urban regeneration initiatives. Seoul is a modern city with rich history and is a UNESCO creative city, and it offers insights into how cities can revitalize declining areas by leveraging cultural assets and taking an integrated spatial approach. One important example of how cultural heritage asset-based urban regeneration is the Bukchon Hanok village, where revitalization of deteriorated traditional houses and communities was at the heart of Seoul's historic downtown, and it created a harmonious juxtaposition between the old and the contemporary city. The area became a major cultural tourism hub, contributing to job creation, and the integration of urban regeneration and cultural heritage restoration demonstrates how culture unlocks urban revitalization through restoring and enhancing both the physical and social fabrics, while providing immense opportunities for tourism development. So to conclude, Seoul's experience shows that a people-centered approach is key to successfully building back better, making the city more inclusive, competitive, and livable. Communities and people, and the leveraging of cultural and heritage assets are central to urban regeneration as an inclusive, resilient recovery from the current COVID-19 crisis. Once again, my best wishes for the Seoul Metro government for continued success in its work for urban transformation and people-centered development. And I wish you all a successful and fruitful conference. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Owaba, for your great congratulatory remarks. 네, 이어서 두 번째 축사로 1,000만 서울 시민의 삶에 직간접적으로 영향을 미치는 도시와 또 주거 문제들 소관하고 계시는 서울특별시의회 도시계획관리위원회 김희걸 위원장님을 연단으로 모시겠습니다. And next, please welcome to the stage Chairman Kim Hee-geol, City Planning and Management Committee of the Seoul Metropolitan Council, for his congratulatory remarks.
위원회 위원장 김희걸입니다.
Good afternoon. I am Kim Hee-geol, Chairman of the City Planning and Management Committee Council of the City Metropolitan Council. It is indeed a great pleasure to host this conference, and I would like to thank you for this invitation. If it had not been due to COVID-19, we would have been able to actually meet in person. It is quite unfortunate that we are not able to do so. As you can see, COVID-19 is indeed impacting the way of our lives, how we use space, and also our mobility. Many experts believe that our lives will not go back to what it was before COVID-19. We need to adjust to the new ways of life after COVID-19. I do believe that video conferencing is indeed one of those ways. Today's conference will discuss the topic of COVID-19, future and strategy of urban regeneration. It is indeed timely and meaningful. It has been 9 years since we have started Seoul Brand's urban regeneration. Of course, urban regeneration projects cannot have results overnight. However, the Seoul Metropolitan City has conducted various projects under the topic of putting people at the center, and we have come up with quite a few excellent cases that are being benchmarked by cities around the world. In the long process of our urban regeneration, we have just gone past the halfway mark, and I do believe that it is now time to go along with cities around the world to create sustainable urban regeneration. The fact that we are hosting this conference at this point in time, it will be a great opportunity for us to renew our thoughts on how cities will look in the future given the environmental changes. I do hope that the discussion today will enable us to come up with various alternatives for the recovery and revival of our everyday lives and the space that we use for our everyday lives. At the Seoul Metropolitan Council, we will continue to support Seoul's brand of urban regeneration so that we become a model not only in Korea but around the world. This year's Seoul Urban Regeneration International Conference is being co-hosted by UN Habitat. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Executive General Madhid Sharif and his team for your support, and thank you also to Global Director Same Waba of World Bank Group, as well as Honorary Mayor of Urban Regeneration, Professor Lee Chung-gi, for all of your support. Last but not least, I look forward to urban regeneration in Seoul reaching a new level thanks to the contributions of speakers and discussants here today and through our online platforms. Thank you very much to our viewers as well. Thank you.
네, 위원장님 좋은 말씀 감사합니다. 마지막으로 이충기 서울특별시 도시재생 명예시장님의 축사를 들어보도록 하겠습니다. And now let us welcome Honorary Mayor Lee Chung-gi of Urban Regeneration for his final congratulatory remarks.
Regeneration International Conference 2020. I would also like to show my deepest gratitude to all our speakers and panelists, as well as the city officials. During this difficult time of COVID-19 pandemic, their support and contribution is of great significance in making the conference happen. Entering a low growth era, urban regeneration has played a major role in the reformation of metropolitan identity. Like other OECD countries, Korea has faced an increasingly aging population, low growth, low birth rate. Together with decades of urban decline and urban regeneration and revitalization, these challenges have demanded a different approach in urban planning. In response to such challenges, a critical shift has emerged towards urban policies of Seoul. From growth-oriented policies and housing-led renewal, the city has put forth greater shift towards the new framework since 2012. Urban regeneration project of Seoul is aimed at creation of jobs, efficient and safe habits, and sustainable future, and ultimately improving the quality of the urban environment. It has focused on rehabilitation of degraded urban areas, revitalization of urban industry, redesign of urban alleys, and transformation of low-rise residential areas. Consequently, it has stimulated social and economic activity, such as citizen participation, growth of governance, job creation, and employment. However, urban regeneration has been criticized for its indefinite and vague direction and purpose that is subject to change. It is agreed that we need to find a bridge between macro and micro perspectives of urban politics and to put greater focus not only inventions on the hard factors, but also on the soft factors. Sustainability is the key driver of a successful urban regeneration. This can be accomplished by strategies as follows. First, the policy should be allowed a greater collaboration between levels of public and private stakeholders. Public institutions assume a supportive role to unlock local growth potential and to build the capacity of private hands. Second, we need to employ a long-term perspective of change. Some urban changes develop incrementally over much longer time frames. We need to ensure instant decisions do not compromise our city's long-term needs. Third, a human-centered city lies at the heart of urban renewal and innovation. There should be more opportunities for citizens to lead and enter their own urban planning for a more resilient, inclusive, diverse, prosperous, and sustainable city. The achievement of urban regeneration lies on the process itself. Regeneration of a city is the process creative and enduring relationships between the community, government, developers, academia, and professionals collectively involved in its design, delivery, governance, and maintenance. In this light, I believe Seoul 2020 is a crucial process of urban regeneration of Seoul. As a realization of urban regeneration, many cities around the world are implementing the notion of fourth industrial revolution and creative economy. Likewise, Seoul has been going along the current trends. I hope Seoul 2020 serves an opportunity to reflect, suggest, and share a comprehensive and integrated vision and action, as well as the potential and feasible resolution of urban problems in various scopes, including jobs, housing, culture, health, and population. Once again, I would like to thank you for all you have brought to Zurich 2020, and I hope it turns out to be a great success. Thank you.
네, 이충기 명예시장님 좋은 말씀 감사합니다. Thank you once again for your kind words. 다음은 첫 번째 기조연설을 해주실 서정협 권한대행님을 연단으로 모시겠습니다. 도시위기 대응을 위한 도시 재생의 역할이라는 주제로 연설을 해주시겠습니다. And now for our first keynote address, Acting Mayor Seo Jung-hyup of the Seoul Metropolitan Government will be delivering a keynote under the theme of Roles and Urban Regeneration, Responding to Urban Crises.
네, 안녕하세요. 서울시장 권한대행
Good afternoon. As have been introduced, I am Chung-hyup Seo, the acting mayor of Seoul.
Welcome to the Seoul Urban Regeneration International Conference 2020. I am Chung-hyup Seo, the acting mayor of Seoul. We have convened here today to discuss the future direction and strategies of urban regeneration. We are standing at an important turning point which will determine the transformation of civilization and the post-COVID-19 era. First of all, I would like to thank Executive Director Maimuna Modu Sharif of UN Habitat, Director Sameh Waba of World Bank, Chairman Kim Hee-gol of City Planning and Management Committee, Seoul Metropolitan Council, and Honorary Mayor Lee Chung-kie for urban regeneration of the Seoul Metropolitan Government for supporting this conference, especially amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, I would like to thank all of the speakers and discussants of this conference who will provide invaluable wisdom and insight through in-depth presentations and discussions. Last but not least, I would like to thank all of the citizens of Seoul who are the real leaders of urban regeneration in Seoul and the real drivers of change and growth in the city as well. This year's conference is being held in conjunction with the United Nations Urban October, which is a global festival to raise awareness on urban sustainability. I would like to express special thanks to UN Habitat again for supporting this conference. In 2020, a major event that will be long remembered as a world-shaking disaster in modern history occurred. That is the COVID-19 pandemic. No one predicted that this new and unfamiliar virus would throw the entire world into confusion and chaos. Our daily lives, our day-to-day routines, and furthermore, our societies, economies, and international relations are changing at an unprecedentedly rapid pace. Remote learning and teleworking have become the new norm. Activities such as shopping and watching performances have shifted to online non-contact channels. The view that human civilization will never be the same before and after the COVID-19 pandemic is no longer a vague prospect, but a vivid reality. However, if we look back on history, cities have always turned crises into opportunities. Throughout history, crises have brought about confusion, chaos, and sacrifice, but at the same time, they have also opened up new windows of opportunities and hope as well. The same can be said about the current COVID-19 pandemic. Now is the time to reflect on the pros and cons of the past, especially of the 20th century civilization, which focused mostly on growth, development, speed, and expansion. Now is the time to take bold action to solve long-standing problems, such as inequality and economic polarization. This great transformation begins with the cities. Now is the perfect chance for cities to make the transition to focus more on people and sustainability. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, Seoul has been making proactive efforts for change and innovation to become a sustainable city. In particular, Seoul has strived to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and also the new urban agenda, which is being pursued by UN Habitat. We have come up with a Seoul-type Green New Deal, which is a master plan for a transition to a carbon-free city. We have also been carrying out welfare policies, safety net policies, policies that encourage investment in people, and policies that aim to fundamentally solve inequality and economic polarization. Furthermore, we have put in place urban regeneration policies that are being led and driven by the citizens. Together with the citizens, we are creating inclusive and resilient residential communities with a distinct historical and cultural context. Seoul's rise to the number 7 city on the 2019 Global Power City Index and the winning of the Lee Kuan-yew World City Prize are the fruit of our efforts. However, the post-COVID-19 era will demand even more substantial changes. Only when cities take ecological, economic, and societal actions can those cities save themselves from further crises and also ensure a sustainable future for their citizens. A paradigm shift for urban spaces is also urgent. As we spend more time at home due to the rapid expansion of a no-contact lifestyle that limits face-to-face meetings with other people, the importance of local communities where we actually live, such as villages and neighborhoods, is becoming increasingly more significant. Urban regeneration can be a creative solution to transform urban spaces. In particular, people-centered urban regeneration can be an effective solution to prevent urban disasters, overcome urban crises, and create inclusive spaces through solidarity and cooperation. Above all, urban regeneration should be more than just a process to recover the physical aspects of a city space. It should be a process that restores the unique urban characteristics of the city. It is important to restore the time and the memory of a city, which has accumulated precious values of history, culture, and life, in the face of numerous challenges and hardships. Also, it is important to restore the identity of the city where people from various backgrounds and from age groups cohabit in harmony. During this process, we can also solve the old problems, such as structural inequality, economic polarization, safety hazards, social conflicts, marginalization, and so forth. Disasters are most critical to the vulnerable people in society. Resolving the issue of inequality caused by the COVID-19 outbreak is also a major task for urban regeneration. Seoul is focusing on the role and value of communities as a basic unit for urban regeneration, especially in the post-COVID-19 era. The word community means both the local space and the group of people residing in the local space. A community consists of tangible things such as streets and alleys created over time, and it also consists of intangible things such as the accumulation of memories and culture. In cities where people from different backgrounds and different age groups cohabit in harmony, communities exist in various forms. Over the years, many cities have undergone community disintegration and conflict while going through urbanization, during which the old is abandoned and renewed, as opposed to waiting for a natural period of growth and decline. The Seoul-type urban regeneration is a solution to overcome such a painful history. Today, I would like to present the future value of communities that will be pursued by the Seoul-type urban regeneration. I will use the 5-letter acronym SEOUL. The first letter S stands for sustainable community. We want to create a community in which the residents want to live and work continuously. We encourage them to solve local problems by working together in order to create local jobs and to revitalize the economy. The second letter E stands for equal community. We hope to foster a community in which diversity is respected. Hopefully, all members of the community can coexist and cohabit in harmony, and no one is marginalized or alienated. The third letter O stands for open community. An open community is a community where communication and shared growth among members are vibrant. This leads to stronger solidarity and collaboration, which in turn leads to proactive and flexible response in the fourth industrial revolution era. The first letter U stands for unique community. A unique community is also a key element. The unique history, culture, and identity of the locality should be well preserved. Finally, the fifth letter L stands for livable and lively community. Instead of the same monotonous apartment buildings, we are aiming to integrate various different structures and create convenient and comfortable spaces for rest and leisure, so the residents can gather together whenever they want. The Seoul Metropolitan Government will strive to realize these 5 values. I have heard the saying, you can't stop aging, but you can stop decaying. Indeed, we cannot avoid aging. Our bodies will age over time. However, if we make the effort to manage our body and mind well, we can slow down the process of decaying and lead healthy lives. It's the same with the cities. Although it's inevitable that growth is followed by decline, I'm confident that if citizens who share memories of time and history gather to form communities, cultivate our spaces, and solve problems together, we can create a sustainable future for the city. So we'll continue to listen to our citizens' voices and provide full support. Furthermore, we will pursue our efforts to expand the possibility of urban regeneration beyond solving urban problems and establish a mechanism for responding to upcoming crises. We will also actively cooperate with the international community across borders. As a leading city in the field of urban regeneration, we will share our experiences and know-how with the cities in Asia as well as those around the world, and establish ourselves as an international standard for urban regeneration. We are now at the starting line of change and transformation. In cooperation with the international community, the 3 sessions and special talk of this conference aim to robustly open up the future of the post-COVID era, defined by the recovery and prosperity of cities and communities. Thank you. 네, 감사합니다.
네, 정말 좋은 기조 연설 감사합니다. 도시위기 대응을 위한 도시 재생의 역할에 대해서 설명해 주셨습니다. Thank you once again, Acting Mayor Seo Jung-hyup, for your keynote on the roles and urban regeneration, responding to urban crises. 네, 다음은 마이무나 모드 샤리프 UN 해비태트 Executive Director님의 두 번째 기조를 들어보도록 하겠습니다. And next, our second keynote will be delivered by Ms. Maimuna Maud Sharif, the Executive Director of UN Habitat, with the subject of international cooperation, urban regeneration, and recovery. I believe she is now online with us.
Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Mayors, Mr. Jung-hyup Seo, Acting Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan Government, Mr. Hoon Ryu, Deputy Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan Government, Mr. Chung Ki Lee, Mayor of Urban Regeneration, Seoul Metropolitan Government, Mr. Marcin Krupa, Mayor of Katowice, City of Poland. Friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. Annyeonghaseyo. I would like to thank and recognize the efforts of the Seoul Metropolitan Government and Mr. Jung-hyup Seo, Acting Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan Government, in organizing the 2020 Seoul Urban Regeneration International Conference. Thank you for inviting UN Habitat to co-host this event. It is an honor to address this message as part of the ongoing collaboration between the Seoul Metropolitan Government and UN Habitat dating back a decade to 2010. In the last 10 years, this collaboration has resulted in several key initiatives, including the implementation of the SDGs, the Safer Cities Program, and the people-centered urban regeneration. I sincerely regret that I cannot be with you in person today at the conference, but I am delighted to share some of my experiences and lessons learned as a planner, mayor, and as Executive Director of United Nations Agency focusing on cities and human settlements. The United Nations marks its 75th anniversary last month. Let me quote the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said that it is clear that the world has high expectations of the United Nations as the main platform for multilateralism and cooperation. Together, we have achieved historic accomplishments such as human rights standards, life-saving humanitarian aid, the steady reduction of hunger, and the progressive development of international law. And it is today, with multilateral solutions, that we will overcome the multi-dimensional challenges we are currently being confronted with, such as the climate crisis, geopolitical tensions, systematic discrimination, and the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. In an interconnected world, we need a network and inclusive multi-partner collaborations, drawing on civil society, cities, businesses, local authorities, and community groups. And the collaboration between UN Habitat and the Seoul Metropolitan Government represents a practical example of how together we can support the localization of the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is the best way to promote urban prosperity and socio-economic recovery. This unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic has threatened to erase the modest progress made on several goals over the past 5 years. On the other side, local and national action to combat the impact of the pandemic demonstrates what is possible if we take collective and decisive actions. The recently launched UN Habitat's COVID-19 response outlines concrete actions to tackle the long-lasting consequences of the pandemic and calls for urgent and coordinated measures. Building on more than 40 years of urban experience and on the UN Secretary General's policy brief titled COVID-19 in an Urban World, UN Habitat is concentrated on city-level response to tackle COVID-19 and its impact in different urban contexts and types of communities. Currently, our towns and cities are still at the forefront of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been most devastating in poor and densely populated urban areas, especially for vulnerable communities. This includes the 1 billion people living in informal settlements worldwide, as well as for internally displaced people, refugees, and migrants. In the current context, urban regeneration represents a powerful tool for local governments to support inclusive and green socio-economic recovery. And inclusive urban regeneration means building back better and greener and transforming cities into dynamic, diverse, and vibrant places. Through a multi-sector effort and inclusive approach, urban regeneration enables cities to provide access to residents to fundamental human rights, the right to the city, to adequate housing and land, the right to water, healthcare, and sanitation, and the right to gender equality, ensuring equal access to public and green spaces. As we reflect on recovery and building back better throughout this urban October, let us celebrate the city which is the site of transformation and recovery. As nations and cities prepare their socio-economic recovery plans, governments need to ensure adequate devolution of authority and funding. We look forward for strengthening our partnership with the Seoul Metropolitan Government and all cities in Korea. I hope you will all consider joining the voluntary local review movement spearheaded by UN Habitat and our partners to promote evidence-based decision-making at the local level and using the voluntary local review as a basis for our collective recovery from the pandemic. I am confident that Seoul and Korea have a lot to contribute, especially in urban regeneration, which can benefit the sustainable recovery agenda globally. Thank you. Hamza Hamida.
Well, thank you very much for that great keynote address. 네, 다시 한번 감사합니다. 그럼 지금부터 잠시 휴식 시간을 가지고 세션 1을 준비를 하도록 하겠습니다. We will now take a short break before moving on to session 1. 그리고 아울러 4시부터는 설문조사가 진행이 됩니다. 시청하고 계시는 화면에 저희 QR코드가 나갈 예정인데요. 그 QR코드를 사용을 해서 참여하신 분들께서는 사실 저희가 경품 추첨을 통해 다양한 경품을 제공을 해드릴 예정입니다. 많은 참여 부탁드리겠습니다. 그럼 3시에 다시 찾아뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope to see you back at 3 p.m. Thank you very much. 네, 편히 쉬셨을까요? 세션 1을 시작하기에 앞서서 저희 발표자분들에 대한 소개를 간단히 드리도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 화상으로 연결이 되어서 혹시 계시면 인사를 먼저 드리겠습니다. 케냐로 먼저 한번 연결해 볼까요? 라파엘 터츠 UN 해비타트 글로벌 솔루션스 디비전 디렉터이십니다. Mr. Rafael Tutz, I believe you are now online with us. Say hello. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Hi, please. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. Thank you once again for your attendance. 네, 그럼 이어서 말레이시아로 연결을 한번 해보겠습니다. 놀리자 하심 Urbanize Malaysia Chief Executive 님입니다. And also in Malaysia, we have Chief Executive Ms. Norliza Hashim of Urbanize Malaysia. Hello, thank you very much for your attendance.
Hi, thank you for having me.
네, 감사합니다. Thank you very much. We will see you once again in just a few minutes. 네, 그럼 다음은 폴란드로 한번 가보겠습니다. 시장님을 대신해서 토론을 진행해 주실 텐데요. 마리우스 스키바 카토위체 부시장님이십니다. So Deputy Mayor Mr. Skiba of Katowice City. Hello, thank you very much for your attendance.
Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
네,
Hello to
감사합니다.
everyone.
Thank you very much. 네, 그리고 다음 이어서는 저희가 피터 비숍 런던 대학교 얼번 디자인과 교수님이 이제 추후에 또 참석하실 예정입니다. And Professor in Urban Design of the University of College London, Professor Peter Bishop will also be joining us. Yes, he is now online as well. Say hello. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Hello.
네, 감사합니다. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance despite the early hours or odd hours of the day. 네, 그럼 또 스튜디오에서 함께 계시는 연사분을 소개해 드리도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 첫 번째 주제 발표를 해 주실 분인데요. 류훈 서울특별시 도시재생실장님이십니다. Now we also have Deputy Mayor Mr. Ryu Hoon of Urban Regeneration from the Seoul Metropolitan Government here with us today. 네, 그러면 포스트 코로나 시대 서울형 도시 재생의 가치와 역할이라는 주제로 첫 번째 발표를 해주시겠습니다. And he will be delivering our first presentation titled The Value and Role of Seoul-Style Urban Regeneration in the Era of Post-COVID-19. 네, 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 여러분 반갑습니다.
Pleased to meet you. As have been introduced, I am Ryu Hoon, Deputy Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan Government. Around the world, we are suffering from this unprecedented situation of post-COVID-19. We see that the relations between people have changed and mobility is being limited. Each family is doing their best to overcome the crises and to prepare for post-COVID-19. I would like to take this opportunity to present Seoul's efforts of urban regeneration as just one of the solutions for post-COVID-19. Let me present under the topic of the value and role of Seoul brand's urban regeneration. I would like to share with you Seoul's experience of urban regeneration, especially from the perspective of community resilience. First, let's take a look at the rapid development phase of Seoul, which is called the Miracle on the Han River. The Korean War broke out in 1950, and it was just after the liberation from Japanese colonial rule. Many people died or were injured, and much of the city was destroyed. In the process of rebuilding the country and through the industrialization of the 60s and 70s, we went through a rapid period of growth. In the 1960s, our per capita income was at $80, but that actually rose to $32,000 in 2019. The population growth of Seoul is unimaginable. We had 1 million people living in Seoul just after the war, and in the 60s that grew to 4 million, 8 million in the 70s, and in the 90s we reached 10 million, so we grew by tenfold. In this process, Seoul worked on providing housing, and as you can see, we started with low-rise buildings, and that actually was switched for the high-rise buildings that you see on the right. We only had 2.7 million houses in Seoul in the 1950s. That actually grew to 3.67 million in 2020. Through the development of the areas south of the Han River, you can see that the residential areas continue to expand throughout the city. However, because we focused more on supply side, we have seen the dismantlement of local communities. As we continue to focus on development, we saw the declining of manufacture in the city center, and we also saw the destruction of historical buildings in the development process. The city became a bland color altogether. Now we needed to think about the Seoul itself. How can we maintain our identity and revive the local communities that have been dismantled? And that is why we have come up with the policy of urban regeneration. So we have shifted our paradigm of developing for economic value to urban regeneration centered on people and community with respect for history and culture. With such a paradigm shift, during the last 10 years, how has Seoul changed? Let's take a look at the fruit of the projects that we have conducted thus far. First is the regeneration of residential areas. These two neighborhoods are the same area. This is called the Persimmon Tree Alley of Changwi-dong. These residential areas were made of narrow alleys and outdated residential areas, quite dangerous to roam around at night. The citizens wanted to change the neighborhood with the support of Seoul. We have renovated the houses, and we also renovated the alleys. The fences were lowered, and we have come up with areas where the residents could rest, which facilitated communication. We see that the older neighborhoods do not have a lot of public areas, and so we have accepted the opinions of the local citizens, and we have expanded public areas such as libraries. And these public areas became the center of reviving communication and also communities. There are some areas where development happened halfway and the community was left with conflicts, but we had neighborhood meetings and local festivals to reconciliate the neighborhoods, not only the residential areas, but the city center, which was becoming quite outdated, have become regenerated into the place to be. There was an overhead that was a center of traffic in the inner city, has now become an overpass for pedestrians, and now it's becoming a center for culture. After the oil shock, we have built the oil tank so that we can store our own oil. We have a total of 6 oil tanks in Seoul, but these series of oil tanks are no longer in use, and so this has been turned into a cultural park for performances and exhibitions. Many areas also suffered from the lack of execution of development plans, such as the nodal island at the center of the Han River. This area actually was revived into a multicultural space for the citizens of Seoul. As you can see from the city centers and also the outdated residential areas, we have been able to regenerate the areas into areas with identity, unique identities for the local communities. We have a total of 205 projects that are ongoing. How have the lives of the people changed? Let's take a look at the Changshin Sungin area. This area was the center of the sewing industry, and that is why we have built the Sewing History Museum. This museum actually has an average number of 2,460 visitors per month. We also built the Baeknamjun Memorial Center, which is a memorial center built on the birthplace of the world-renowned artist Baeknamjun, and now it's becoming a focal point for income in the local area. And so you can see that these new facilities have become a place for job creation and economic activities. The Shinheung Traditional Marketplace has also become a hit place to be. Seoul Market Show, which is one of the most renowned shows in Seoul, has taken place in this market, and now the local community actively participates in taking care of the green area surrounding the traditional market. The Seoul Mall, which was at the center of manufacturing in Inner Seoul, has become outdated because much of the manufacturing moved outside of Seoul. Now it's become a maker space, inviting local technicians and collaboration with the younger generation. We have seen small companies work in these maker spaces to create products and actually commercialize their products. This was possible due to governance. We have created a platform for urban regeneration, and citizens actually utilize that platform for self-development and growth. We would like to focus on the local community for our success. Let me share that experience with you. Through test beds for urban regeneration, we have learned that it takes a long time to revive communities. And so, we have developed a local community capacity building program for the neighborhoods that wish to participate in urban regeneration. We conduct education and training for the local community to build their capacity so that they can participate in urban regeneration themselves for their local communities. This was a very effective approach with high satisfaction levels of the actual participants, and this actually led to the result of expanding across the country. If you are selected as a space for urban regeneration, you are then connected with a support center that connects the public sector with the residents. Activists also participate in this process to discover issues for the communities, and the communities become stronger in this process. Furthermore, we also create hub areas. We collect opinion of the residents, and we also decide on which facilities will become the hubs. And when these facilities are designated, the local residents then participate in the management of these hub facilities. These hub facilities become the space for the communities, and also they become the foundation for future development. In order to make sure that the residents have ownership of the local areas, we have facilitated local festivals. The residents will plan and prepare for festivals and participate themselves to build community bonds. All of these neighborhood meetings actually happen 120 times a year. There's one point that I would like to point out is sustainable support. The local communities, they need to become independent of public support in the long run. And so, we encourage the building of corporations, and we actually support about 280 million won for the first 3 years. The Changshin-Sungin area, which was the first recipient of this support, we believe will become independent quite soon. Thus far, we have worked on people-centered and community-centered urban regeneration in Seoul, which is what I have shared thus far. Through this process, building relationships is the most important. But due to COVID-19, it is very difficult to meet and gather as we have done before. Many people are working at home. We have non-face-to-face services. And like today, we have teleconferencing. So our everyday lives are changing. In line with these changes, we are also changing our platform to adapt to the new reality. Urban regeneration is about connection. In this COVID-19 era, we are not meeting, but we are finding ways of meeting with new methods. For example, we have town hall meetings online. We also have chat rooms that can be used to express opinions. We can actually utilize these new methods to include more people into our dialogue. Dialogue can continue on online platforms. We can ask questions about urban regeneration, we can share examples, and we can highlight the value of urban regeneration. I do believe that today's conference is an effort to continue along this direction. We also need to focus on the local economies, and that actually is in line with our direction as well. We are focusing on communities for urban regeneration, and I believe that going local, having a virtuous economic cycle in the local communities is indeed one of the solutions that is quite viable for solving issues of rundown inner cities. Based on Seoul's experience, I believe that the recovery and growth of communities will become the new standard for the post-COVID-19 urban policies of the future. Thank you for your attention.
네, 좋은 발표 감사합니다, 실장님. Thank you once again for the great first presentation. 그럼 이어서 다음 발표로 넘어가 보도록 하겠습니다. 다음은 도시 재생과 코로나19의 사회경제적 회복이라는 주제로 라파엘 터츠 UN 하비타트 글로벌 솔루션스 디비전 디렉터님께서 발표를 해주실 예정입니다. And next up, we have our second presenter, Director Raphael Tutz of the Global Solutions Division at UN Habitat, who will deliver his presentation on urban regeneration and COVID-19 socio-economic recovery. So, Director Tutz, I believe you are now taking over the floor, so please begin when you are ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the Seoul Municipal Government, Metropolitan Government, for inviting us to this important international conference. What I would like to do today is to share our experience in connecting urban regeneration with the socio-economic recovery of COVID-19 with a focus on spatial planning. Next slide. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that in the pandemic, cities have been at the center. We know that many cities are affected by the pandemic, and over 95% of the cases of the pandemic are in urban areas. At the same time, we should also note that we have many people who are living in slum settlements and informal settlements, more than 1 billion people, which have particular constraints related to dealing with the pandemic situation. And over 2 billion people lack adequate situation, as you know, again, with major constraints related to how to respond to or protect themselves against the spread of the pandemic. So it is a challenging situation that is very much urban focused. Next slide. So what we realize now is that we need to rethink the way urban planning is happening. We need to think about how the density of settlements is organized. And the particular debate between density and overcrowding has been very strong over the past months. what constitutes good density, what is bad density, for instance. But we have also seen that the inequalities, the spatially determined inequalities in our cities are currently exacerbated, and which actually make it more problematic for governments at a local and central level to respond to the pandemic. So we are looking towards a much more bold future, more inclusive, more green and resilient. And of course, as you know, this is easier said than done. I would like now to move in the next slides to move forward with some very specific suggestions in this regard. Next slide. And the way we would like to do that is discussing different scales, moving from the regional to the city scale, to the neighborhood and the building scale. Because if we zoom into these different scales, we will see opportunities and challenges for dealing with the pandemic. Next. At the regional scale, we know that the pandemic has disrupted some of the common linkages between urban and rural areas, and has halted this. And we need to rethink what needs to be done to safeguard these linkages through the at the regional level. We also need to realize that especially tertiary cities are affected and don't have much capacity to provide services. And finally, we need to be aware of how blue and green networks can be used to make cities more sustainable. Next. If we move down to the city scale, there is a lot of talk over the past months about the 15-minute city. 15-minute city, Paris has started, but also Portland in the US have really advocated for a structure of a city that allows equitable access to housing, basic services, and open spaces. This is something that is now being studied. How can this be implemented? Because it would really be very helpful to allow people to manage a situation of lockdown. Also, the public transport is something that must remain safe and needs to be addressed, and the ICT quality in cities has to be prioritized. Next. Going down to the neighborhood scale, which is very much connected to urban regeneration already, is again the walkable city. How can we access our needs, services within 15 minutes walking, let alone the 15 minutes connection with public transit, but now walking. And the design of the public spaces is absolutely essential to compensate high densities in cities. But they have to be organized to maintain social distancing. And we see also opportunities for urban regeneration because during this situation, urban voids are becoming very apparent, and the possibility to create urban farming solutions in these voids is also very critical, especially if rural-urban connections are disrupted. Next. Finally, the building scale, which is an area of much concern related to settlements that are overcrowded or that are very high density without adequate public space. So the minimum housing space needs to be looked at. Also green building standards to allow to more energy-friendly solutions, and also flexibility in the design, especially flexibility in large spaces for medical or public health purposes needs to be included in the design. Next. Let me now move to how to connect this with urban regeneration. Next. There are a number of areas where we can intervene. First of all, the focus on the existing, what is already there. And already over the past decade, several cities, as you can see on your screen, have looked at the existing fabric and how to reutilize the existing fabric for different purposes, and to allow also land use policies to stimulate this reuse, which would have very important consequences for housing and for both housing and economy. And through this more flexibility and adaptable reuse of spaces for the benefit of both housing and economy, and to revive economic opportunities in the cities. Next. The second dimension of this is to looking at public amenities, the outside spaces, the green infrastructure within the cities, and to invest in this to be able to withstand situations of public health crisis, building networks of parks and playgrounds and sport facilities that can be used when outdoor is becoming very much important. Also, the emphasis on walking distances and avoiding public transit in some cases is going to be important in the plans we have on urban regeneration. So basically, it reinforces the principles of urban regeneration, but highlights some of the areas that we need to have a fresh look at in the principles. Next. In the next slides, I would like to focus on the frameworks that that have been put up and we are putting up to respond to the COVID-19 recovery. Next slide. The first one is an existing framework. It's the New Urban Agenda, which already provides a shared vision for a more sustainable future. And it focuses on 5 different pillars. Focus on national urban policies, urban legislation, planning and design, local economy, and local implementation. If we carefully look at these pillars, we will see that already there's some commitments that governments have made to have a much more sustainable future, which would be in line with a positive response to a new normal after the pandemic. Next. We have launched flagship program on urban regeneration, which addresses the issues of persistent spatial inequality, which are highlighted on your screen. Inequality that is shown by the unequal distribution of basic services, unequal access to public space, underutilized urban spaces, and also spatial segregation. These are the key elements that, again, are exacerbated during a situation of pandemic, and that our new flagship program on inclusive, vibrant neighborhoods and communities is trying to address. Next slide. We are doing that not only through guidelines and principles, but moreover through specific work with cities. This international conference is a good example of how we try to promote exchange, but also on the ground in cities like in Nairobi, where we are based, in Mosul, Iraq, where we are looking at urban recovery after a conflict, in Cancun, Mexico, where we're looking at reorganization of a park, and in Beirut, Lebanon, which was also severely affected by an incident very recently, we are looking at an urban recovery framework. Next. So this flagship program is addressing, trying to advantage some opportunities, but also we are facing some challenges. And some of these challenges, I think, are partly addressed by this conference. First of all, we have seen that the documentation on urban regeneration remains very scanty. That unlike other domains of urban study, urban regeneration documentation is not sufficiently made available, and also the capacity of local governments to address these fairly complex issues needs to be looked at very carefully, and particularly the ability of local governments to work with private sector and civil society in designing urban regeneration projects. Next. In the United Nations, there's a number of frameworks that have been developed. There's an overall socio-economic framework for redevelopment, for recovery. The Secretary General of the United Nations has issued a policy brief which focuses on urban regeneration or recovery in an urban world, looking at these inequalities, development deficits, looking at the capacities for local government, and looking at a better, resilient, and gender equal green future in response to the pandemic. Habitat has a specific response plan with work in many cities and countries, direct support to cities and countries in the recovery. Next. Next slide, please. But in the long run, we will have to address a number of issues beyond the immediate recovery, beyond this year and next year. We are proposing 4 areas that need to be addressed, and we are in the process of organizing some specific analysis in 4 areas that we will try to share with participants in 4 webinars in the coming 2 months. The first one is the rethinking of the role of the state, the specific responsibilities of where the state and local government and different levels of government need to act in response to this pandemic and possible future pandemics. This is the issue about multi-level governance and who does what in an area of crisis like this, avoiding overlap, looking at clarity and allocation of resources where they're needed most. The second area is addressing the systemic poverty and inequality in cities, and the data that we are uncovering shows this, how the pandemic has exacerbated, especially inequality within cities, and how can we address that? We're coming up with some very specific solutions, much like what I have been talking about in the beginning of this talk. Then the rethinking of the urban economy model. Urban economy model has been found to be very fragile in this pandemic, and we need to look at what this means for labor markets, for investment, and what new models can be more resilient in a situation of crisis. Also, urban morphology, I've discussed on that in the beginning of the crisis. What is it that density, compactness, how should they be rearticulated moving forward? So this is our new piece of work that will culminate in a new report on the future state of cities in a world of pandemics that we hope to launch in February next year. Next. Another important piece of work that we have already launched during the past couple of months is a source book on health in urban and territorial planning, which we have done together with WHO. And this book is actually going back to the very foundations of urban planning, which were based in public health discourse from starting in the United Kingdom, and going back to the roots of planning and systematically looking at how health and well-being in our cities is determined or is co-determined by different scales and levels of planning. Next. So we're very happy that all these different elements, that all these different guidelines are now coming together in a new handbook on urban regeneration and socio-economic recovery, which we are developing in collaboration with the Seoul metropolitan government. Next. To conclude, key messages which I would like you to take away from this talk. First of all, the multi-scalar approach. And I think urban planners have a critical role to take the lead in looking at these different scales systematically, from the region to the city to the neighborhood, and then to the building scale, and keeping this systematically together, because you may have contradictory recommendations at this different scale. It's very important for planners to keep this together. The second, integration of health in urban planning is something that we need to insist on for better, cleaner, greener, and more healthy cities. We cannot go back to the old normal. We need to embrace the new normal with some of the recommendations that I have proposed in this lecture, and to embed them into the investments that we need to make in the coming months and years to recover. And then we need to focus on vulnerable populations, because large parts of our cities have been shown to be vulnerable and disadvantaged in responding to the pandemic. And finally, empowerment of local authorities, because they are not sufficiently equipped to link the urban generation or to take advantage of urban regeneration's opportunities during an urban recovery. Next slide. I would like to thank you for your attention and looking forward to the debate. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you once again, Director Tuts, for that great presentation. And also, thank you once again for such a smooth presentation online as well. 네, 잘 들어봤습니다. 그럼 바로 이어서 다음 발표로 넘어가 보도록 하겠습니다. 다음은 도시의 기능과 지역사회 회복력이 다시 상승하는 열쇠, COVID-19이라는 주제로 놀리자 하심 Urbanize Malaysia Chief Executive님께서 세 번째 발표를 해주시겠습니다. So now moving on to our next presenter, we have Ms. Norliza Hashim, the Chief Executive of Urbanize Malaysia, and she will be delivering her presentation on the city's functionality and community resilience, key to rising again to COVID-19. So Ms. Norliza Hashim, are you ready? Can I give you the floor for your presentation?
Yes. Hi, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Sorry. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well, so please proceed with the presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Good afternoon and good morning in some parts of the world. Thank you very much to the Seoul government for inviting me to this conference. Congratulations for having this. Because I think despite the pandemic, it's a very important time for us to be discussing a lot of these issues, especially with regards to how we deal with the building back better in developing better communities for the future. So I come from an organization called Urbanize Malaysia, and we are under the Ministry of Housing and Local Government of Malaysia, and our work is very focused on urban sustainability and urban well-being. And for the last 3 years, we've been trying to focus on delivering the ministry's sustainable agenda among the cities in Malaysia. So I think the COVID is something that globally we are all concerned about. We are all facing a very serious issues, and in Malaysia, this is a number at the time I submitted my slides, but today it's already about 22,000. And it's something that is very concerning the whole of Malaysia, just as much as other parts of the world. But what's also interesting that most of the cases that we have, they are very central to the urban areas, Kuala Lumpur, Selangor. I know these are where 9 million of our people are residing. So whether or not the question by Ralph just now, whether density, intensity is an issue, well, I guess the fact that when there are more people living in one area, the chances are higher to contact such kind of viruses. So this is something that we are dealing with, and we are currently under a lockdown situation as well, but it's very located in certain areas only. And because of that, I think why we are also very concerned is because Malaysia generally, we are very much an urban nation. We've got more than 78% of our people living in cities, and that's where all the jobs are, and it contributes to the economic GDP of our country. So we have almost 25 million people residing in 320 numbers of the city. And definitely it's a concern to us on their livability, their well-being, especially during these very troubled moments. So some of the issues that Malaysians are facing, and I believe quite similar in other parts of the world, is we are facing a huge unemployment rate as well. And it's been the highest since 30 years ago. So, and this is something of a concern. So, and we can see that it has changed a lot. It has affected how consumers are spending. And most importantly, the worry is on the mental health of our people itself. So this is something that is to be concerned about, the stress that everyone is going through. But at the same time, I think this should not stop us from, planning and moving forward. And especially at the cities, city is actually at the front line. And we've seen over in history itself how the various epidemic that other parts of the world are facing was actually one of the case for biggest change. And this is where I think that, listening to the papers that has been presented before me, definitely this new urban paradigm is required for more inclusivity, green and smarter cities. And I think, this is the opportunity to do something better. So part of our work in Urbanism Malaysia is to look at sustainable urbanization, because the 155 local government actually falls within the purview of the ministry. So what we have done over the last 2 years, we've actually developed a roadmap for our cities to actually prepare their local action towards the sustainable agenda. So we have come up with a methodology and have been going around into explaining this to our cities so that better design, better governance could be cultivated in ensuring that the city's needs are taken into consideration. So I think this is the bottom-up approach that we hope to achieve. And we've also come up with measuring on the level of sustainability performance. But we look into 3 major outcomes for our cities. One is inclusive growth and development for everyone. Second is to how they could access quality services, as well as address a huge disparity that is not only happening between urban and rural, but is slowly even happening within the urban areas. And third, of course, we're looking at environmental sustainability to mitigate a lot of the climate change that is also happening to us almost every other season all the time. So we've looked at COVID itself, and it helps in terms of how we are ensuring that cities in Malaysia have the right focus in terms of knowing where the agenda could help drive their focus of development. And of course, SDG 11 is crucial. And of course, we also look at SDG 1, poverty, hunger, health and well-being, as well as work and economic growth as very central to us prioritizing what we should do during this COVID situation. And I think this is where sustainable urban regeneration is important. And if we were to revive cities and our urban areas, this is where we need to really understand what are the local issues, what are the challenges that our communities are facing in order for us to revisit some of the planning that we are doing, which is for Malaysia is always an ongoing process. And it's something that we are always concerned about from time to time. And asking the people is, I think, very important, and communication is important. And during COVID, I think, Malaysians generally, most of them have a handphone, and 80% of Malaysians have a Facebook, which is quite amazing actually. So I think reaching out to the people, understanding what they want is actually not as difficult as it used to be in the past. So that helps us in terms of a lot of the program that Malaysia have started to provide for communities in terms of economic recovery, in terms of handouts in terms of social stability. So these are short-term recovery plans that the people have actually benefited ever since. So I think this is also digitalization. People are always saying that that's core, that could help. So we recently launched our digital economy blueprint. And I think here is where we are looking at a different economy altogether now, especially in terms of shared economy, which is something not new in some parts of the world, but it's quite new in Malaysia. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of emergence of the shared economy, and I think this is an important move forward because it has changed how during COVID itself. I think there was no more denying it. The change in consumer pattern, the retail trends, and well, I think we are just as concerned because, like everywhere else, our malls are shrinking. A lot of big retail companies are closing, and so I think what is being done now is that people are shifting in terms of different modes of marketing and providing these services to people. So in Kuala Lumpur itself, we are also looking at this economy from a different perspective, and creative districts are now suddenly being introduced back into the city, and how the city could continue to be living lab. There's more discussion now about shared spaces and how this could be more cost effective, affordable spaces. So I think things which we've taken a lot for granted in the past is becoming much more relevant today, and this is I think a real good opportunity to retrofit buildings and repurpose its use, instead of just leaving them behind. So managing growth is something that we are doing constantly, and we have a pattern of out-migration suddenly, where people from Kuala Lumpur are starting to move out into the suburban areas, and it's similarly happening to the bigger cities that we have here. And this is where I think a revival of certain parts of the city need to be done, and this is now done with more, I would say, strategies that are more humane, looking at what is really needed at the ground, rather than just talking about the big investment that's supposed to come. So during COVID, we ourselves conducted some surveys trying to understand, the kind of housing that people are living in Kuala Lumpur and how they are facing with the stress level that's happening. So yeah, definitely, I think, it does show that living in high-rise development or affordable housing can be quite a strenuous thing, So even though studies have shown that there's no real relationship between density and the virus itself, but I think livability is still crucial here, and this is something that we are also in Malaysia rethinking on our affordable living, how to make it still comfortable and not too crowded, and maybe we should relive back what we used to have. We used to have shop houses, people living at the ground, living on top, working at the lower ground. So I think these are models that are slowly coming back, and we're having more transit homes, micro homes, mixed income homes, something that we were not used to in the past, because our planning has become very single use over time. And caring for our aged society is becoming more crucial, being discussed more openly today, and increasing green density is something of an agenda. So it has always been landed where you're asking for 10% green, But I think today we are talking about greener densities, vertical greens, and this is something new. In fact, changing land use zoning, where we are now bringing in agriculture zoning into cities, which we have left out for many decades, So urban farm has come up to be very important. And during COVID, this was one of the, or rather now, there's a lot of grants that's been given to community to start their own, homegrown farms in their own community area. And there's more now debate about all these issues on culture, conservation, and what we are trying to move now is having a community action plan where, because if you're going to get all this data in time to prepare the right blueprint to overcome the issues on the ground, you probably don't have the time. So we are encouraging community now to prepare their own action plans and bring them to local governments. So probably that would help, simplify things or hasten things faster. And one of the things that we have actually set up is this collaborative community platform where we are encouraging people to share their work, their efforts, and in order to escalate the learning curve for everyone. So we could just scale out something that has been done or repeat it again, and learn from other experiences. So I think in this situation of COVID, it's the power of many and the power of small initiatives. And we ourselves are doing all this kind of community hubs to just start to give back to the community on what is really important. Because, during COVID, food was a big issue. Now people are starting to plant their own food and trying to also bring back these gender responsive budgets where people take control about what they want, how it's been planned, and the money that's supposed to be spent rightfully in their community. So I think these are things which are important, but even as small as a literacy program, because we just realized that in our big efforts to have this rollout for 5G, we still have people who are illiterate. And this is where digital inclusion becomes very, very important. So I think in urban regeneration and the COVID itself, it brings much challenges to cities, but it also brings a lot of opportunities for change. And community resilience definitely is most important, and people actually are very powerful. They adapt very easily, and they are stronger than what we think they are. And this is where having the sustainable agenda is important, and looking at the perspective of inclusivity, adopting all the innovative and creative solutions, and having a shared economy, I think probably are crucial at this point in time. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you very much, and open for discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you once again for that great presentation. It was a very comprehensive and compact presentation. So thank you once again. 네, 잘 들어봤습니다. 그럼 이어서 바로 다음 발표자로 넘어가 보도록 하겠습니다. 이어서 폴란드 카토위체시의 도시 재생을 주제로 마르친 크루파 카토위체 시장님께서 발표를 해주실 예정입니다. And now for our next presenter, we have the mayor of Katowice City, Mr. Marcin Krupa, to deliver a presentation. 네, 폴란드 카토위체시의 도시 재생이라는 주제로 발표해 주시겠습니다. And his presentation is titled Urban Regeneration in Katowice. 네, 화면을 통해서 만나보도록 하겠습니다.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to take part in this fantastic conference. At the beginning, I would like to apologize for this recording, but currently I'm quarantining due to coronavirus, and if I feel worse, I may not take part in the conference. I would like to keep my word and take part in this conference, especially that last year during the music cluster meeting of UNESCO Creative Cities Network, I visited Korea and Seoul and was touched by your hospitality. I would like to tell you a few words about Katowice and its transformation from the industrial city into the city of culture and meetings. Katowice is a fairly young, 155-year-old city in the south of Poland. It is one of the most developed business centers in the country, with a significant share of industrial activity. It is the capital of the Silesian province and from 2017 the largest city of the Katowice metropolitan area, inhabited by over 2 million people. It is home to renowned academic, medical and cultural institutions. The symbol of this transformation is the culture zone, which I would like to tell you about. The culture zone is the example of a revitalization which Katowice has undergone in the recent years. This comprehensive development project is one of the most recognizable spots on the city map, and it attracts many people, not only culture lovers. Looking at innovative architectural solutions, skillfully combined with green squares, it is difficult to imagine that only 20 years ago it was an active coal mine area. Today, only the refurbished post-mining buildings adapted for cultural purpose prove that a mine was once operating here. The entire project is an excellent proof of dynamic changes Katowice undergoes and of the new vision of the city. This area has 4 pillars: a museum, a concert hall, a congress center, and an entertainment sport arena, between which there is space intended for residents and their guests. It forms a complete cultural, recreational business offer. The new seat of the Silesian Museum was harmoniously composed with the buildings of the former mine, and most of the exhibition was transferred underground. Fantastic acoustic of the National Symphonic Orchestra of Polish Radio Hall is praised by music lovers and musicians from the entire world who give concerts in Katowice. The International Congress Center is a multifunctional facility, that venue of many training courses, congresses, fairs and conferences. The unique quarter is complete by Spodek Arena. The legendary arena, with after modernization, remains one of the most important sport and entertainment facilities in the country. It guarantees an exceptional atmosphere and unforgettable experience during conference and sport games. Creation of Culture Zone helped youth develop the international business meetings industry, as well as cultural and sporting events. In recent years, Katowice has become a space of great events from various fields. Excellent infrastructure facilities, organizational experience, and an open approach of the city office make Katowice a perfect host of global events. The Climate Summit COP24, the 5th World Anti-Doping Conference, and the World Urban Forum planned for 2022 are the flagship examples. The most important events include also the European Economic Congress, which attracts people from the world of politics, businesses, and NGOs from a few continents. Thinking about events taking place in Katowice, one can pass over sport championship held in the Spodek Arena. However, business, politics and sports not the only leitmotif of Katowice events. Culture plays an important role on the map of local events. The music lovers can choose outdoor festival, for example, Off Festival, Tauron New Music Festival, or indoor festivals such as Rawa Blues, Karol Szymanowski International Music Competition, Silesian Jazz Festival, or Katowice Jazz Art Festival. Great composers like Henryk Mikołaj Górecki and Wojciech Kilar created their music in Katowice. The city prides itself on Silesian blues road and is the place of birth of Polish hip-hop in the 1990s. Hence, it is no wonder that in 2015 Katowice was honored with the title of UNESCO City of Music. Today, I would like to this opportunity to invite you cordially to the World Urban Forum in Katowice in 2022. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation, Mayor of Katowice City, once again. And now moving on to our next presentation. 네, 저희 시장님 발표 잘 들어봤습니다. 그럼 이어서 다음 발표 바로 연결해 보도록 하겠습니다. 이어서 지역사회 지향적 개발을 주제로 피터 비숍 런던대학교 도시디자인학과 교수님의 마지막 발표 청해 볼 텐데요. Our next presentation is from Professor Peter Bishop, and he will be delivering a presentation under the community-oriented development. So, Professor, are you online and are you ready to go?
I'm online, and can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. So you have shared your screen, so I believe that we're all set. Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be with you. I'm just very sorry I can't be in Seoul today with you, but I'm delighted to be here online. You've asked me to talk about community-orientated development, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to look at the methodology, and I'm going to look at an extended case study, which is the King's Cross scheme in London, which I worked on for 6 years. But let me explain this opening slide. This is a graphic that we produced when I was the Director of Design for London, which was the Mayor's Design and Architecture Studio. And this slide was trying to explain the organizations, not the people, but the organizations involved in designing one piece of public space in London. And it's not meant to explain it, it's just meant to say that the world we live in is incredibly complex. Cities are as much about stakeholders and those relationships as they are about the physical fabric. And I would define the role of a city planner, a city designer, as having the ability to understand and navigate the complexity of relationships. And sometimes, if you can put the right people together, sometimes really good things can happen. And that is the basis of the work I've been doing, I hope, in London over the last 20 or 30 years. Can we go to the next slide? I can't. Here we go. Thank you. Let's just quickly understand what a city is. A city is more than its physical fabric. A city is a place where people live. And I know that's obvious, but it's surprising how often city planners and designers ignore that basic fact. A city is there to facilitate the active lives of the people who live there. It's a place for chance encounters. It's a place for exchange of ideas and goods. And critically, it's never complete. Now, whatever work we do, we never finish the job of the city. What we do is we take it on to the next stage and hand it on to the next generation. Therefore, it's an ongoing project. But critically, the role we have as urban designers, urban planners, is to try and produce cities where the interaction and the pleasure and the delight of the lives of our citizens is enhanced and not the other way around. I thought I probably should define what community-orientated development is. There are many definitions, but these are some of the characteristics. First of all, it understands its context. It's not a question of taking a scheme you like in Singapore and trying to build it in London, or in London and trying to build it in Sao Paulo. It's about design that comes from the context. that context is about the cultures of the people who live in that area. It's development that delivers social and economic benefits as well as financial returns. And it's development that you therefore measure by a range of outcomes, including a set of non-financial outcomes. Community-orientated development, when it's carried out effectively, can achieve broad consensus. It won't achieve complete consensus because we live in a pluralistic society, but it can achieve a broad consensus, and it can produce and should produce cities which are open and accessible to all. And critically, I think if you do it well, you produce a piece of city that is sustainable. And a definition of sustainability, which I like, is that it contains the ability to adapt and improve long after you've left it. And increasingly in the world today, I mean, the cities we live in, is a question of can we build cities which encourage rich lifestyles and harmony and communities that live at peace with themselves, or are we going to be thrown into cities of conflict? And we're at a very, very critical stage at the moment, I think. We were before COVID, but COVID has made it even more critical. And it means that designing around community integration and giving citizens a stake in their society, their neighborhoods, is even more critical now than it's been in the past. For a time, for about 5 years, I ran the Mayor of London's architecture and design studio called Design for London. And when we set it up, we started off with a very, very basic question that if we were going to design a city like London, who were we designing for? And this was a very early graphic that we produced. This is an outline map of London showing some of the nationalities that live in London. And I think there's something like 160 different nationalities living in London. Something like 360 different languages are spoken. It's a truly cosmopolitan city. And this triggered a really clear response from us as a design team that there was no way we could impose design solutions. We had to go and talk to people. We had to understand the broad range of different aspirations, and we had to design around it. And therefore, in terms of a design methodology, we adopted the idea of the design charrette. So almost every project we did, we moved our design teams into the neighborhood we were working in. We rented a shop, we opened the door, we invited people in. We were there for about a month. We walked the area with them. We talked with them, we argued with them, we debated, we drew, they critiqued our work. And out of it emerged a methodology of community involvement. We were still the designers, we still did the drawings, but we invited the community in to tell us how they saw their neighborhood, what were the stories of their lives, and to allow them to tell us whether or not the proposals we generated from those stories were right or whether they didn't fit their aspirations. And a very, very simple approach came out of this. Two things. First of all, this idea that you value what's there. You start from the fabric of the city. You don't wipe it clean. You nurture the possible. There's no point in producing plans which will never be realized. You work within the possible. You define what's missing, and that is where the designer intervenes. So it's a very organic approach to community-orientated development. And in particular, we really like the idea that our role was it was a bit like taking a complex piece of machinery apart, understanding its pieces, and trying to reassemble it in a way that it worked better. And that's the work we did. And out of this came a whole series of projects, creating new public spaces for some of the poorer communities. This is Brixton. This was a large traffic gyratory system. The same scheme, the same public space scheme, but this is at night. And we wanted our schemes to work 24 hours a day. And by talking to local people, we understood what the conditions were of their lives. And it meant that the schemes that emerged were ones which had very, very strong community ownership. Another scheme in East London, this was a car park, which we turned into a really effective new community square and space. And this was a traffic junction in South London, which very, very simple intervention, including buying pink tables and chairs to the local cafe owner. And the cafe owner was delighted to help us manage the space, to try and create the activity to make it successful. So these are just examples where small-scale schemes can make a huge difference if embedded in the needs of the local community. I'm going to sort of finish with an extended case study, and that's the King's Cross scheme. 27 hectares in central London, and I worked on this from about 2001 to about 2007. Worked on the planning of it. Major development opportunity right next to the high-speed rail lines between London and the rest of Europe. Right on the edge of one of the richest districts in the European Union. But around it, there was an area of poverty. The communities around it had high levels of unemployment, high levels of multiple deprivation, and severe inequalities in terms of health and life expectancy. And the real kind of question we asked ourselves was, why would a development of land next to these communities make a difference? And we started off by trying to define with the community a set of key objectives. And the interesting thing about this was this tension between recognizing the huge opportunity, an internationally important scheme, how we had to deliver that, but also make sure it delivered huge positive change to these poor communities. We wanted social, economic, and physical integration. We wanted to create a piece of city that local people felt was part of their neighborhood and not a place they felt uncomfortable moving into. We wanted it to change the surrounding area. We wanted to retain the heritage buildings, but also create a piece of London, a new piece of London, around very, very strong environmental performance criteria. But having established these objectives, we went down to another stage. And we said, let's turn these into political objectives. Let's really understand the politics behind regeneration. And what really engaged my politicians, and I was director of planning for this part of London, was to say a child born today will be 18 and finishing school when the first job's available. Why will this scheme make a significant difference to their life chances? How can we deliver significant improvements and life-changing opportunities to the surrounding communities, and how we can integrate it? And these three things were the tests we applied through the development negotiations. Right from the start, the development company and myself, the chief executive of the development company, myself as the planning director, we made a public commitment that everything we did, every document we produced, would be published in the public realm so everybody could see what was happening. And secondly, I and the chief executive of the development company made a joint commitment that we would go anywhere, anytime, and speak to anybody. And we think that over the 5 years we were working on this project, we think we spoke to about 30,000 people. And we provided a face for the council, a face for the developer, that people could then feed their ideas into. And this is what this process looks like. This is a timeline for the negotiations. Below the line are all the documents the developer published, and above the line are the documents that the city authority published. Each time we published a document, we stopped and we debated with local people, then we moved on. And we didn't start by trying to say, here's a scheme, here's a model, isn't it wonderful? Tell us why you like it. We started from a blank piece of paper, and we started with the first documents were, let's have a debate about what a good piece of city looks like. What are the objectives? What are the principles for a human city? What are the objectives we're trying to do? And only when we'd agreed those with the community did we move on. It's not an efficient process. It's time consuming. And this is just the documentation. But what we did achieve, I think, was a degree of consensus which didn't exist when we started, and a really deep understanding of what the local community was, what they wanted, which we could build in to our design process. Out of it came key issues. People wanted affordable housing for local people. They wanted to keep the heritage buildings. They wanted a public realm which was open and accessible to all, and not exclusive. They wanted really strong environmental performance. They wanted local jobs. They wanted a place which is inclusive for everybody. And then we produced a final document. This is really complex, and I won't dwell on it, but we went back to this idea of a child born today will be 18 when the development is finished. And we mapped the life cycle of that 18-year-old from birth to 18. We looked at what social and educational provision existed. We understood the gaps, and we worked out a joint investment program with the developer. So the developer provided preschool, a primary school, local training, support for businesses, and we worked out an arrangement whereby they would make jobs available through local contracts to local people. So out of this, we tried to frame a development that didn't just produce a piece of real estate, but where there were really well embedded principles that allowed local people to benefit from this. The scheme today is about 85% completed. It's seen as a global exemplar. One of the schemes is visited from people all over the world in terms of an urban regeneration project. It's delivered. 47% of all housing is affordable. And in addition to that, 600 student units, a local training and employment scheme that's put about 900 people from local areas into jobs in the scheme. It's provided a new school, a public swimming pool and a public sports centre, 10 new public parks, a major university has anchored the scheme, the University of the Arts of London. And then there's commercial floor space, independent shops, and we hope it's a new piece of London. Is also, apart from being popular, and it is popular, even the architectural press has praised it, but if you go there on a weekday, if you go there in the evening, you go there the weekend, it's busy. It's become a destination. People choose to go there. But also, because it's been successful as a place, it's been successful commercially. And from a very, very low base, and follow the red line, it's now become, from one of the lowest rental areas in London, to become one of the highest rental areas in London. And now it's outstripping the traditional office district of central London, and it's almost up in terms of rentals with the West End. So it's popular, it's effective, but it's profitable. It's based around very high quality public space. Public space brings people in. People come in, they spend money there. People locate their businesses there because it's buzzy and it's exciting. The developers also put a huge amount of investment into event management to make sure the spaces work. There are events for one coming up for Halloween, there'll be events for Christmas, events for sporting events, big screens, there are markets, and there's arts festivals. So constantly make it a place that's exciting and buzzy. And then finally, in other places, I hope we produced a very, very high quality areas of public realm, which have enhanced the historic fabric, which form the deep, deep DNA of this area. So that's my last slide. I'm going to finish, but to say community-orientated development, We should do it anyway. Morally, it's what we should do. We should promote as urban planners. But actually, enlightened developers realize that actually it reduces the political risk of development. And in the long term, it produces developers that sit harmoniously with the local communities and therefore are more profitable. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you once again, Professor Bishop, for that enlightening and also thought-provoking presentation. 네, 잘 들어봤습니다. 열정적으로 발표해 주신 모든 발표자분들과 또 긴 시간 집중력 있게 참여해 주고 계시는 많은 시청자분들께 다시 한번 감사 인사드리겠습니다. 저희가 이것으로 주제 발표는 마무리를 하고 잠시 휴식 시간 뒤에 4시 30분부터 바로 토론을 시작해 보도록 하겠습니다. And thank you once again to all of our speakers and of course our audiences who have stayed with us during the presentations. We will now take a very short break and resume at 4:30 p.m. For the discussion. But we kindly ask all of our presenters and speakers to please remain online so that we do not have the glitches of connecting you back during our discussion. 네, 그리고 현재 시청하고 계시는 유튜브 채널을 통해서 화면 중간에 나가는 그 QR코드가 있을 텐데요. 그걸 통해서 설문조사에 참여하실 수 있습니다. 설문조사에 참여하신 분들께는 저희가 추첨을 통해서 다양한 경품 드리고 있으니 많은 참여 부탁드리겠습니다. 그럼 잠시 후 4시 30분에 또 뵙도록 하겠습니다. So we will see you back here at 4:30. Thank you very much. Online so that you can be ready to begin the discussion at 4:30 p.m., 30 past. Once again, for our presenters and speakers, please remain online so that we can start right away with the discussion. Thank you very much. Well, thank you once again for coming back. 휴식 시간 잘 지내셨기를 바랍니다. 그럼 저희 이어서 주제 발표자분들과 또 토론 시간을 가져볼 텐데요. 서울시립대학교 박준 교수님을 좌장으로 모시고 토론 시작해 보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 토론에 앞서서 저희가 시청자 여러분께 안내 말씀을 좀 드리고자 합니다. 금일 토론은 부득이하게 폴란드 카토위체 시장님과 또 서울시 류훈 도시재생 실장님 대신에 폴란드 카토위체 부시장님과 또 서울연구원 김인희 도시공간 실장님께서 참석해서 진행을 해주시겠습니다. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a refreshing break. I will now move on to our discussion time with the speakers as well as Professor Park Chun of the University of Seoul as the moderator. And today we also had other speakers, but we will invite Deputy Mayor Mariusz Skiva of Katowice City, as well as Director Kim In-hee of the Seoul Institute to take the places of the Mayor of Katowice and Deputy Mayor Ryu-hun of the Seoul Metropolitan Government. 네, 그러면 이것으로 제가 박준 교수님께 마이크를 넘기도록 하겠습니다. Professor Park, please take the floor.
Okay. Good afternoon, treasured participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am the moderator of this session, Jun Park from University of Seoul. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to distinguished presenters and audience for your participation again. We had a series of very intriguing and informative presentations. Thank you for the presentations. In my understanding, our virtual conference is being aired through the platform YouTube, right? So I think many YouTube, the audience are watching this conference. We are more than welcome to have your participation in this panel discussion. So YouTube audience, please feel free to send us the comments, questions, or your ideas for using the reply function, 댓글 in YouTube. Okay, from now on, I would like to commence the panel discussion. As you know, the theme is community resilience and rise. So I prepared some of the related issues and topics for this theme. So let's open the panel discussion with an issue of social housing and affordable housing in urban regeneration. Provision of social housing has become trickier now than before when there are more available lands and budget. In this context, urban regeneration in deteriorated areas can be a good opportunity to provide affordable housing as the urban regeneration is accompanied with land use and floor area ratio density change by planning authority, which can make more space for affordable housing. This is also important for an urban regeneration project to be inclusive, addressing the possible problem of gentrification. So, in this context, it will be very interesting to share our ideas on the balance between economic goals and the livability for resettlement of original residents and inclusion of other lower middle-income neighbors, considering this social housing and gentrification issue. What's your view on this? Peter, could you share your idea on this?
Thank you. Well, first of all, certainly in the UK, and I suspect in a lot of countries, we're seeing significant shortages of good quality housing, especially for people on lower and middle incomes, especially for key workers. And a lot of our cities, especially city centres, people are being priced out of the market. This is classic market failure. And one of the roles of the state, in my view, is to intervene positively to address market failure. And therefore, state intervention to provide affordable housing either through legislative insistence or through funding or through direct programs, I think is absolutely correct in terms of an urban strategy. I also think that mixed communities are a good thing. I mean, London is very, very fortunate. We have rich areas and we have poor areas, but we also have an extraordinary mix of people living in areas across the city. Rich and poor can live in the same street, can live side by side. I think that gives the community a far greater resilience. It gives our children a far better life experience of actually mixing with people from right the way across the social and the cultural experience. So I'm a huge supporter of affordable housing as a planning objective. In London, we have a policy. It depends on the politician, on the mayor, but at the moment, an expectation under planning that 50% of all housing provided by developers should be affordable. We're not achieving that. That's a planning objective. But I think in most developments, we're getting something like 35% of new housing is affordable. And I think that's building far more resilient communities within the city and is combating the evils of social polarization, where the rich and the poor are segregated into gated communities or into ghettos and never mix. Does it combat gentrification? Maybe we have a longer debate about gentrification. Gentrification is the widespread dispersal or ejection of a particular community. I mean, cities change. A city like London changes organically and is constantly in a state of flux. But I'll finish by saying, in the case of King's Cross, now there's more affordable housing in the local area than there was before we started, because there's nothing on site. We now have housing. And because a lot of the housing stock in the surrounding areas was owned and managed by public authorities, there's not been a major shift in the composition of those communities. But I hope the injection of a greater diversity of housing has diversified the community and made it actually stronger and more resilient.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yeah, that is very interesting that according to the London plan, you have the rule of the provision of 50% of the affordable housing when you have a new development, right?
Because it's not a rule; it's a policy objective.
Policy, according to the London plan.
And in reality, it's 35 to 50%.
Right. And also, thank you for the comment on the importance of the diverse housing for more resilient community.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Ini, could you have a say on this matter?
네.
During the last 3 years, Seoul experienced various issues, and amongst those issues, housing was the biggest issue. It's not just an issue of affordable housing, but with the increase in socio-economic status, there is a demand for high-quality housing and also public housing. And so housing is a major issue not only in Seoul, but across Korea. Seoul is making great efforts to solve this issue of housing. One of the most important policies for housing is connecting it with urban regeneration. If we take a look at the past decade, up until the early 2000s, in Seoul, we tried to bring down old apartments and build new housing. And for the cultural areas in renovation, we try to bring them up to international standards. I think that was a true direction of urban regeneration. Of course, we did have improvements in terms of physical structures and competitiveness, but there were social conflicts where the original community had to move out, and we sometimes actually ruined the heritages, and it was mostly top-down. And so from 2011, with Mayor Park Won-sum stepping into office, we have a complete change in the culture of planning. It's not top-down, but we recognize that the communities have ownership, and so the community actually participates in the planning, and we believe that the community knows a solution the best, and so we try to make sure that our policies are centered around the site or the community, and that's why we have the participatory culture of planning. We have visions set by the communities, and budgetary decisions partially were made by the citizens themselves as well. And I think one of the biggest policies that the citizens participate in is the Seoul's brand of urban regeneration that we are discussing today. We have about 180 urban regeneration projects that have been ongoing with the participation of the citizens. If we take a look at the next 10 decades, how are we going to solve the issue of housing, which is currently in the limelight? In the past, we would have teared everything down and build high-rises. But this actually was tabooed, but maybe it is inevitable because providing housing is important. How are we going to deal with this? We need to think of the percentage of the original community resettling in the newly developed community. But if there are facilities that are not needed, if there are physical improvements that are needed, we could build high-rises if needed. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we include public housing in these renovations. And so we need to sometimes think of ways to increase the density of the population in urban development, especially for residential areas. And we can provide a bulk of that to the vulnerable groups, such as the original community, the youth, or the students. So we not only do we need to include the original community, but we also need to connect ourselves with experts and private organizations to increase the amount of housing that we provide. Currently, we have 100% provision of housing, but because we have more people who are living on their own and we have more people who want to move into the city, so we will need to provide more housing in Seoul. So not only the regeneration that we have conducted, but we need to find ways to boldly increase the number of housing that we provide. Maybe we can benchmark what London has conducted. The Seoul Metropolitan City has a master plan that is being established for 2040, and in that master plan, we will certainly benchmark cities around the world, and we will provide new policies for providing housing.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. So social housing and public housing, not only are they in demand, but we also have a shortage of housing overall. There could be many different ways of providing housing, and many of these methods have met its limitations. And so we need to use urban regeneration to do upzoning so that we could provide more housing as needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, In-hee. I think the balance may be a bit different by local context. Raphael, what do you think the difference of the balance in urban regeneration in this issue, in especially emerging cities in developing countries?
Thank you so much. I think it's a very good question, and it's a universal question, but of course it plays out in a very different way in a city like London or a city like Seoul or a city like Nairobi, where we are based. But and I would like to give an example of how some projects that are coming up here and how they would relate to this question. But before doing so, I would like to say that over the past 10 years, UN Habitat has promoted the concept of more compact, integrated, connected, and inclusive cities. And in fact, most of our work is measured against those criteria, whether urban renewal or a new development is more compact, more integrated, more connected, and more inclusive. It's a good way of measuring ourselves and our the quality of the interventions that we support, and that is all over the world, in Brazil, in Colombia, in South Africa, and in Kenya. But the most difficult of those elements, in my experience, is the integration, the social integration. The economic integration is fairly reasonable. That is, mixing different functions into one neighborhood is a concept that is more and more acceptable. But social integration, that means mixing different socio-economic groups in one area, is one of the most difficult concepts to accept, also in emerging economies, or especially in emerging economies. Now, let me give you one example. Here in Nairobi. Nairobi is a city of 4.5 million people, and very close to the central business district, there is an area of about 8 square kilometers, consisting of 14 estates that were built in the 1950s, before independence. And these houses are very low rise. It's like one-story buildings with very small units, so leading to a lot of congestion. And they were intended actually for bachelors, not for families, because at that time families were not allowed to enter close to the center of the city. Now, the idea is, how do you move from that to a new area? It's a huge regeneration program. The idea is to build 60,000 units. So it's moving from 12 to 60,000. That means times 5. It's a huge opportunity to build affordable housing. And that's going to happen. There's no question that there's going to be lots of affordable housing. In fact, the amount of affordable housing will be the majority. The challenge will rather be different. The challenge will be, how can we make sure that also some middle-income housing is mixed into this in a good way, so that there can be social interaction between different communities, but also, and I think more importantly, between the affordable housing and the housing for the urban poor is the big question. That means, what is affordable? In Kenya, a house of $50,000, $70,000 could be seen as affordable housing, because it is not expensive, and it would be able to reach a large part of the lower middle income of the country, of the city's population. The problem is to get to the real low income, to the lowest 20%. It's extremely difficult, and therefore, and I think that is in countries like Kenya, that's the challenge. Is not to get into the affordable housing market. It's to get into the lowest 20% of the urban dwellers who may never be able to own property. So you need to think of other concepts, maybe tenant purchase system, rental housing, to be able to attract those families also and integrate them in such urban revitalization schemes. I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rafael. We could understand the UN Habitat's effort for compact, integrated, connected, and inclusive city, and in the process, the issue of social integration is one of the tricky issues. And also, thank you for sharing the Nairobi's case, and also it is important to set up some policies for especially the lower 20% income group. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all. And okay, now let's move on to the next issue, which is the use of ICT, the information and communication technologies, for citizens' participation. It is argued that the use of ICT technologies can lead to greater and more efficient participation of citizens in urban policies. This forms a significant body of research and arguments in smart city these days. For instance, in our presentations, in the King's Cross case, it took around 7 years for the dialogues and discussion between stakeholders, which shows the London's value on the citizens' participation in our urban policies. If we adopt these technologies in the process, can you really reduce the time and enhance citizens' participation more? Do we have any practical experience of this? And how about the issue of the digital divide? How can you reflect the voices from those who are not quite familiar with these technologies and applications when we adopt these new technologies in the process? Nolija, please.
Professor, for the question. Yeah, I think in Malaysia, we have started to use technology or digital technology in terms of reaching out to communities, you know. But I don't think we can do it 100% because even though there's a lot of phone users in the country, in fact, the phone users are more than the population itself. However, not many of them have smartphones or understand the level of requirement that's needed if you were to do your research, you know, via such kind of platform. Even our e-census, which is currently being carried out, this is the first time we are using electronic means of doing our e-census. We are not able to do it 100%. So it's still being done on both modes of electronically as well as doing door-to-door surveys. So I think when you want to talk about urban regeneration, of course, there are people living in urban who have more access to some form of technologies, you know, ICT technologies. However, my own practical experience dealing with communities, it's much, much more effective when you're on the ground talking to them. However, you can use technology for simulation, telling them about how these changes can have impact on them, and you know, and how such you know, how they will benefit from it. But I think when it comes to people engagement, you can do a general survey through using technologies, but at the end of the day, it's much, when you're really trying to get the plan on the ground, I think it's easier if you engage them personally. So yeah, on my say on this, or my personal experience in this, I think we do need to have both, you know, situation. We don't have, I think in a lot of the urban regeneration programs that we have, even if we were to do a public exhibition, for example, we are putting a real project on the ground, you know, and then we want to get feedback from people. Yeah, so we still have the physical, you know, exhibition where people can actually come in, they can ask questions. So, but it has definitely, with digital technology, you can shortcut certain things where information can be given beforehand, but the engagement is done in both ways, you know. So I think we are still doing both here in Malaysia.
Thank you, Nolija. Thank you for the comments on the use of ICT for this greater citizens' participation. And after having one more comment from our presenters, I want to share one of the questions come up to our YouTube reply window, the window room. Okay, so after one more question, or after one more the comments. Peter, please share your idea on this issue of the use of ICT for greater citizens' participation, please.
Well, I mean, you have to accept that I'm a lot older than everybody else, so I count myself hugely fortunate at having worked in city government before social media. All we had to worry about was the local newspaper. It made life a lot easier. We took 7 years on King's Cross because we had 7 years because the land wasn't available. We couldn't have speeded it up. But I think the real lesson from that, it's a bit like the difference between, fast food and slow cooking. The time we spent talking to people, understanding the problem, designing it, I think made it a good scheme. We really understood the complexities. We couldn't have done that in 6 months or 9 months or 1 year. I think if we're doing it today, we'd certainly use social media. We'd certainly look at a whole range of different techniques. But I don't think we'd structure the approach in a different way. First of all, you've mentioned the digital divide. We were dealing with a poor community where a lot of people didn't have access and still don't actually have access to laptops and smartphones. And I think the time we spent face-to-face with people, the time we spent having lunch with the Chinese Women's Lunch Club, or sitting with the Bengali Women's Sewing Group, or talking to local school kids, I think one face-to-face, showing that we were people and we weren't an anonymous machine, I think was incredibly valuable. One hot afternoon, we hired a van that sells ice cream. And we went round the local neighborhood, ringing our bell, and anybody who talked to us and gave us some ideas and feedback got a free ice cream. And that involved people who wouldn't have been involved through ICT and media. And I completely agree with what Nolisa has said. The time we spent doing the design charrettes with design teams working with the community, it allowed people to get their pens out, to draw, to argue. And at the end, and we could go outside, we could walk around the neighborhood with them. And at the end of the day, the most valuable time was when quite often we'd end up in the pub drinking beer with people. And that's when you build trust, and that's when you build the relationships. And that's where you build a real desire to try and do something a bit more than you'd otherwise need to do as a technical architect and planner. So short answer is ICT is a useful new tool. It shouldn't replace face-to-face contact. It shouldn't replace the traditional ways in which we've engaged people. And it certainly has to be treated with caution in terms of the digital divide. And the risk is you produce a barrier between those shaping the city and those who will have to suffer its consequences.
Right. Thank you, Peter. Peter's comment on especially the digital divide, and the last comment was very impressive, right? Those who shape the city, and we must think about the consequences from that. We need to think about those who are behind this sort of the new adoption of the new technologies and so on. These ICTs useful, but cannot replace the traditional relationships and face-to-face relationships. Thank you very much. And while we are having the discussion, we have some of the questions from the YouTube, and I want to share one of them now. That is about the importance of the sort of the software aspect. I mean, when you think about the urban regeneration, we can think about something new with the higher density of the buildings and so on, right? And also even for the social housing, we can think about the sort of the social housing building and so on. But that can lead to a problem of sort of the social stigma. I think it's more to do with the social housing generally. In Korea, we have some social stigma on the residents in social housing. For instance, sugar in Korean or Elsa in Korean. I mean, this is not quite, good words for those that the residents there. And the question is, the YouTube audience, audience want to have the other international experience, how to the focusing on the urban regeneration project focus more on this software aspect, especially the community empowerment and social mix in urban regeneration. So in the meantime, we have the panel discussion with the other topics. Okay, then please think about this issue at the same time. Okay, let's move on to the next issue. That is the distribution of the benefits in urban regeneration. What we can get from a project is always our top interest, which induces more active engagement of participants. That is why the distribution of benefits, including development gain from urban regeneration project with stakeholders, especially with local residents, is important. We can think of the provision of social housing, as we discussed before, schools and parks. Do we have any examples of the benefits other than this provision of social housing or community facilities in urban regeneration project? I think this is to do with the YouTube audience question as well. Marius, please. Please turn on the mic.
Sorry about
Thank
that.
you. I can hear you clearly.
That's perfect. Hello to everyone. That's pleasure and honor for me to participate in this evening in this event. And first of all, I would like to thanks organizer government of Seoul for organizing this event and for recognizing the city of Katowice as important spot of the processes of urbanization and regeneration. And now, regarding to your question, maybe I will tell about the sources of the situation which we have here in Katowice and engagement itself, which can be defined in one word, acceptance. Acceptance to the changes that we can be expressed in multi-way. And I can give you some examples. The first example is the culture zone. The culture zone that we can see in the presentation, which was performed by Mr. Mayor Marcin Krupa, who unfortunately can't be here with you because of the quarantine and the restriction which are caused on him now. But I will refer to the culture zone. The culture zone which has been at the beginning, the people from the city of Katowice actually were inclined toward the dysfunctions. There were even the poll run by one of the newspapers that had shown that only several % of people were willing to revitalize that space which for long years presented heavy industry branch, which there actually was the mining coal, and they weren't willing to revitalize this in that direction, in the direction of culture. But then that appeared that something like it was something like the breakthrough, like the impulse paradoxally going against the direction government of the city gained the publicity. It was something like the masterpiece. Later on, it was much more easier to proceed next projects because we gained the publicity and inhabitants gained someone like the natural leader who laid the card on something what seemed to be somewhat conflicting with the picture of the city of coal and steel. Thanks to the project's ambition of our inhabitants raised, and they started to have high expectation, mainly regarding to the adjective eco. Thanks to that, we gain full conscious citizens of our city. I want to underline this, not only inhabitants, but citizens who for who nothing is indifferent. They became our allies in converting our economy. They demand for green. They started actively participating in projects like, for example, Katowice, what can be translated as Kato citizen. And this is somewhat like the answer for the last question for the audience, to have something like the mixed solution. And through these projects, they can plant the trees, for example. In first edition of the project, over 600 trees was planted in a spot which was pointed through internet platform by inhabitants. Their activeness is very helpful in initiatives of cleaning up the forest, for example, on parks. So thanks to that, city changed itself in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of clearness. Thanks to that, they like it spending their free time in city. In past, during weekend, they prefer going out. For example, in past, they preferred going to, for example, to Krakow. Meanwhile, thanks to the culture zone, we applied again the title of City of UNESCO in culture. And now this is the complexity. More and more people from outside loved the events the city offers them. So thanks to them, we have audience and user of infrastructure. Katowice prides itself on its eco-image more and more often. Residents also see the changes, and anytime they can put roller skates and test the nearly 4-kilometer roller skating track on rent a kayak. Even in the valley of 3 ponds, hundreds of runners can be seen in the area, and in summer, children enjoy the water playground. The south of the city and the locust forests are a paradise for cyclists. There are 180 kilometers of roads and bicycle routes through Katowice. And people who don't have two-wheelers can use the largest network of city bike rentals in the voivodeship scattered throughout the city. Another very important beneficiary and participant in the process of transformation, those were the beneficiary which represent the business. The business who took important role of revitalization of our city. I can list two another examples: Industrial and Technical Park Porcelana Śląska, where on the area of 3 hectares in revitalized buildings of porcelain factory from the beginning of the 20th century. Those constructed modern technology park, which which was founded in 2012, and this is and it's the historic renovated complex. There are 7 buildings that entered in the municipal register of monuments. There are design offices, art galleries, interior design shops, advertising agencies, and restaurant, bistros, and gallery, concert hall. And all this effect was with the sum of around 2 million euros, including 50% of EU subsidy. Another example, and actually this from what actually everything was launched in the city of Katowice. This is Silesia City Centers, one of the largest shopping, service, and entertainment centers in Poland, which was built in the oldest district of Katowice, on the site of former Kleofas coal mine, and in the vicinity of zinc smelters from the turn of 19th and 20th centuries. In the year of 2004, a new period begins for this place when the Hungarian investor Strigrand decides to revitalize the post-mining areas and build the Silesia city centers. It was the first example of revitalization of post-mining area in region, as I mentioned, and opening of this space took place in November 2005. What is very also crucial in the development of our city is participation of private business in realizing principle of energetic transformation. We've got such an example of GPP Business Park. The company since 2005 has been transforming post-industrial area that is located on the borders of our city, and the company created the zone of modern business activities and innovations that are focused on technological development, which is compliant with pro-environmental approach, which rated as outstanding building that which was awarded with prestigious BREEAM International certificate. And those also things promote us on an international stage, and thanks to that we've got also the acceptance in the international level. Thanks to that, we hosted in the year of 2018 the COP24, which was a forum to discussion about the challenges to the climate. And in the year of 2022, we will be hosting the Urban Forum. We as the city to place where almost no one wanted to come, created the opportunity and space to discussion. And we are proud that in the year of 2019, over 800,000 people decided to come to our city. Thanks to that, more and more investment we have in a hotel branch, for example. We transform ourselves from the city of heavy industry into the city of industry of meetings. And somehow also, if I may also, of course, say something what is regarded to the first question about the social housing. May I something add also to that? because social housing is also very crucial in the addition of the city of Katowice, something what is the answer for the principle what is stated in our strategy, which claims that the population is one of the biggest challenge of our city, and the declining number of inhabitants, and in terms of also of quality of life and the examples I mentioned before. So our strategy of gaining inhabitants and attracting new ones is based on 3 pillars. The entry point is ensuring well-paid workplaces. Katowice that has a strong brand in eyes of entrepreneurs. They willingly open their offices here. The reason of the consists of some factors: well-skilled human resources, perfect location, and well-developed system of support. Today, in describing our city, we emphasize the roles of science potential in economy, and infrastructure of the whole metropolis. And those actions make natural condition for entrepreneurs who willingly open their offices in Katowice and creates new workplaces for our graduates. Despite the pandemic, we have the lowest rate of unemployment, which is on the level of 1.5 at this moment, and this is the lowest unemployment, in fact, in our country. At the same time, we invest in housing base and the opportunity of spending spare time. What I mentioned before, only such activeness might the young people to launch their careers in our city, and later on build up the private start families. We want our policy in this field become something like the impulse for young people who decided to pick Katowice as the place to work, to take it also as the place to live, to start family, to bring up their children, and secondly, that is high quality of life. The housing and work are crucial to people to feel and express that living in Katowice is perfect. Today we talk about fashion on Katowice. Katowice is more and more, and we hope to be the most beautiful city. I see a lot of families in the culture zone, which attracts with fantastic architecture and interesting offer of events. We seriously treat the industry of free time, and our inhabitants as well as guests from region and all Poland come to Katowice on the big sport events which we host in sport arena. There is big interest in musician festival, and NOSP hit the records of popularity. This was, I think, very broad approach which I gave to you, and I hope this fulfill your expectation in terms of question I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marius. Yes, the Katowice can be seen as a very large scale of the urban regeneration, right? So this is a big transformation from an old industrial and mining area into a very cultural hotspot. And Marius introduced some of the interesting benefits to the residents, including the skate trails, and water playground, and city bike rental scheme. And also it's important for the business, which can, that's forming a better business environment. It can lead to more jobs and a better human capital, all these positive externalities from an urban regeneration project. Okay, Nolija, can you share your idea on this issue of the benefits other than the social housing or the physical thing is?
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely in urban regeneration, there are many benefits, and in a lot of, especially in Malaysia, urban regeneration are very privately driven. I know in some countries it's driven by the municipal council. So in our case, it's mainly led by the private sector, with the public sector coming in to facilitate the process. And this is where I think always trying to create a balance between the importance of social benefits or community benefits against economic benefits is always a challenge for us, because though we have very clear guidelines, and even in any development projects or regeneration projects, we are definitely supposed to still provide for affordable housing, and which is like 40% of the whole residential quota and 10% of green, However, most of the time, a lot of urban regeneration creates, it's very costly, that's for one. It requires a huge investment in terms of infrastructure development. And so you always see a dilution of some of these social interests. But of course, there's a lot of benefit to urban regeneration, and where the city as a whole, I think the impact to the city as a whole is definitely there. What we're always afraid is the displacement issue that urban regeneration provides, or give an impact on. So, but we're still very positive about urban regeneration. That's something that we have identified, like in Kuala Lumpur itself. We have the identified areas for urban regeneration. We've also identified for just improvement schemes in certain parts of the area. So I think the level of urban regeneration is important for a city to establish, because it needs to take into consideration of the existing people that's living in the area. The last 5 years, we've seen a lot of out-migration out of Kuala Lumpur. And a lot of them leaves Kuala Lumpur mainly because of wanting maybe better homes with the same price, that you get in the city. So this is where I think the challenge for urban regeneration projects is how to continue to provide that balance. But definitely what we benefit is always better infrastructure for the city. Such kind of regeneration normally brings good and better infrastructure, better urban services that comes into the area. The whole built environment definitely improves with urban regeneration. So we have had good quality urban regeneration projects. But I think the scale of urban regeneration project is also provides impact. If it's too small, then I think this is where you don't see the benefit holistically. So it needs to be of a scale where some of the trade-offs can happen in the same area. That is the most important thing, whether or not we can create the trade-offs in the similar area. So yeah, I think the one that we benefit most in Malaysia that we observe is the level of infrastructure, the level of urban services that comes with it, and more parks, in some areas. But I guess what we like to see more is a more mixture in terms of while this urban regeneration happens, what we don't want is to create more gaps in terms of social disparity. That means to say, could we have mixed income housing in the same area? That has always been something that is very challenging for us. But what I also see that it has created a lot of awareness. It has also created a lot of professional development among locals, because I think when you do an urban regeneration project, it's not just one form of professional. You need a whole group of people to come together to actually make it work. And you not only talk about the built environment professionals, but the social professionals, a whole lot of people if you want to make it very successful. So a lot of capacity building happens when you do such kind of urban regeneration project. And I think we experience that in most of the urban regeneration that we do, like in Kuala Lumpur city center, the amount of capacity building is quite enormous. And I think that's what we benefit from, the learnings from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Norlisa. She shared the challenges in urban regeneration in Malaysian context, and she mentioned about the importance of scale, what we can provide. It can sometimes depends on the scale of the project. And very interestingly, she introduced the issue of the capacity building in the process of the urban regeneration. Okay. And this is very much to do with the community empowerment, one of the issues we want to discuss later. Thank you. And before moving on to the next issue, I want to briefly introduce some of the comments from the YouTube audience. The audience says that in the cities like Seoul, where we have a 10 million population, sometimes the announcement of an urban regeneration project can trigger another increase of the house prices. So that is one worry from this audience. So the cities like Seoul, in an urban regeneration project, it would be better to focus on social or the cultural project or the integration. So that is the comment from the YouTube audience. And let's move on to the next issue. Next issue is about the community empowerment, as I mentioned, in urban regeneration. The slum or informal settlement upgrade can be seen as one of the types of urban regeneration in a broader sense. Typical type of redevelopment approach in these areas, in most cases, can lead to expel of original residents, as most of them don't have legal title of the ownership of the lands in the area. And this is one of the reasons why community resilience and empowerment needs to be centered in this process. Self-help housing or incremental housing or similar is the example in this regard. Raphael, can you share any case of slum upgrading, informal settlement upgrading project which focused on this aspect? There are some barriers for redevelopment or upgrade in these areas due to high population density and lack of temporary residence during the construction. If you just implement a community empowerment project, for instance, without physical improvement, then can it be called an urban regeneration? What's your view on this, Raphael?
Thank you so much. I think it's again a very interesting question. Yes, you're right. Slum upgrading can be seen as part of urban regeneration in the largest sense. But let me first zoom in a little bit on what we would mean formally in the United Nations with slum upgrading, because we need to understand the definition of slum. It's a word that's been often misunderstood. It's a very precise definition. A slum is an area that has a number of deprivations, including overcrowding, poor building quality, lack of services like water, sanitation, lack of security of tenure, as you mentioned, and also lack of accessibility to jobs. Now, if 3 out of the 5 are not present, then we can confidently talk about a slum situation. And then conversely, slum upgrading would need to address these issues. You see, if you do a slum upgrading and as a result, the people living in this area do not have improved access to services or access to work or better housing structure or better security of tenure, then you haven't done any slum upgrading. Then it's not a proper slum upgrading program. Essentially, it deals mainly with in situ improving of the conditions. Of course, by improving the conditions, issues of density come up. There's opportunities for increased value of the area, maybe for extending roads, for increasing densities, etc. So you could come up with a win-win situation. But to achieve that, obviously, there needs to be very, very intensive consultation with the community. Now, and it is impossible to do it otherwise. It's almost like a social contract that you would need to establish with the community. Social contract meaning that there is a give and take. There will be disturbance, there will be inconvenience. Some people will have to temporarily live in other places to be moved back to better conditions. But in exchange, there will have to be a safer and a more healthy living environment. Also, there will have to be more financial contributions to the city. Slums are typically neighborhoods that are not formally included in the urban system. That means virtually no taxes are paid, or definitely not property taxes. So this is a give and take, improvement in exchange for changes in the security of tenure, in the contribution to municipal finance, and in exchange a safer, a more healthy, and in many cases also more wealthy residents. And for that you need obviously very, very thorough community consultation. Such cases can take sometimes more than a generation to complete. But during that time, at any given time, let's not forget the full structure of the city. We are trying to look at the full concept of the city with different neighborhoods that at some point of their lifetime will need some upgrading. And it's a cycle of city revitalization that may affect a certain neighborhoods at one time, and maybe 10 years later or 20 years later, other neighborhoods will also go through the same process, maybe in a different way, but still it's a constant. And I think other speakers have said that it's a constant change, organic change, and urban revitalization is one element, it's one moment of that change. Now, the last question you're asking about, if we're talking simply about community empowerment without physical improvement, for me, I would not call this an urban revitalization. In our spheres, one would need to see an increased quality of the physical infrastructure, the physical structures, alongside economic benefits, social benefits. But if it is purely an intervention that delivers social benefits, I wouldn't use that term. It's of course an intervention that is very valuable, that is a social intervention, but I would not use the word urban revitalization for that. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Raphael, for the very insightful comments on this issue. As you may not have noticed that it's the time's up already. I wish we could have more time to cover more topics. But now I think it's time to conclude our panel discussion of the community resilience and rise. Audience, please give a big round of applause to today's presenters and panelists, please. Okay, can you? I believe the presenters can hear the sound of applause, okay? Although they are in Kenya, UK, Poland, and Malaysia now. Okay, I would like to convey my heartfelt appreciation to everyone for your treasured presence for a long time here and also online. Thank you.
Thank you very much also to the presenters as well as our moderator, Professor Park. Thank you once again very much. 네, 오늘 참여해주신 연사분들과 또 좌장을 맡아주신 박준 교수님께 다시 한번 큰 감사 인사드리겠습니다. 이렇게 저희가 준비한 2020 서울 도시재생 국제 컨퍼런스의 1일차 행사가 모두 마무리가 되었습니다. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that concludes the first day of the 2020 Seoul Regeneration International Conference. Thank you once again for all of your avid participation. 긴 시간 동안 저희 온라인으로 그리고 오프라인 현장에서도 함께해 주신 많은 분들께 다시 한번 감사 인사드리겠습니다. 내일도 저희가 2일차 프로그램이 알차게 준비가 되어서 아침 10시부터 시작이 됩니다. 내일은 도시재생 실험실과 또 글로벌 도시재생 기획 결과 발표 그리고 세계 석학들과 함께하는 스페셜 토크도 함께 준비가 되어 있습니다. 10시에 알람 꼭 해놓으시고 온라인상으로 또는 함께해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. And tomorrow we also have a fully packed day in our day 2 of the event. So tomorrow we'll also be looking at the Regeneration Living Labs, global urban regeneration presentations, as well as a special talk with renowned academics from around the world. Please remember to join us. It's 10 a.m. tomorrow morning at Korea time, so please remember to join in. 네, 이것으로 그러면 오늘 1일차 행사 모두 마치도록 하겠습니다. 다시 한번 감사드립니다. Thank you once again for your participation, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.